Greetings, film fanatics. Filmholmes here, and welcome to another rendition of Too Many Movies. While I was scouring through Netflix the other day, I stumbled across a couple movies where it's actually a couple movies in a trilogy, but they only had the first one and the second one on there, and I decided to give them a watch because the first one is one of my favorite comedy movies of all time, one of my favorite 80s movies of all time, and the second one is fine. And then the third one, well, the third one's not on there for a fucking reason, but it's basically the film franchise that made Eddie Murphy into an international superstar, and today I'm going to talk about the Beverly Hills Cop Trilogy. So let's get started with the first one. So Beverly Hills Cop, not only one of the best 80s movies of all time, but one of the best comedies of all time. Honestly, like, I'd say probably top 50, maybe even a little bit lower, and it's a fantastic comedy, but also a fantastic cop movie as well, because it knows when to be serious. But directed by Martin Brest, of course, starring Eddie Murphy, Judge Reinhold, John Astin, what's the other guy's name? It's not going to show it, is it? Nope. And another guy. Beverly Hills Cop tells the story of Axel Foley, which is such a freaking awesome cop name when you think about it. Axel Foley, who's a wisecracking Detroit cop who kind of bends the rules a little bit, but very likable character because Eddie Murphy, at least back then, was a very likable guy on screen. He screws up this bus at the beginning of the movie, but an old friend of his from when he was basically a criminal kid comes back and they reunite and they have some fun. Well, basically that guy is murdered while in Detroit. He came from Beverly Hills, California. Eddie Murphy takes a vacation and goes to Beverly Hills to try to figure out what happened to his friend. I need to stop holding the damn movie up. That's a habit. I need to stop doing it. But that's basically the movie. It's a fish out of water story in a way. Eddie Murphy, a Detroit cop. Detroit's a really rough place. He goes to Beverly Hills where it's very clean, and it's a hell of a lot different than New York. I haven't been to either one, but pretty sure they're very different places. And Eddie Murphy, he basically bumps into the Beverly Hills police trying to solve this crime, and they're trying to keep him away from people, and he's able to get away from the police with his wisecracking ways, and comedy ensues, but it's also a very good cop movie. There's some investigation, and you know who the bad guys are, but Eddie Murphy kind of uncovers what they're doing. And the two cops, Judge Reinhold and John Astin, who play great, almost like a play on a married couple in a way. It's really, really funny. They become Axel's friends in a way and help him with the case, but at first they're trying to keep him away from everything, keep an eye on him. And the three of them are just comedic gold together. It really is almost like the Three Stooges, but I can't think of a better comparison. They're just so damn funny. And I mean, we don't spend much time in Detroit at the beginning of the movie. The stuff happens. Axel's friend is murdered, which we don't get to see much of his friend, but from what we see, you really do believe that these guys grew up together and that they really do love each other. The actor they got to play his friend did a great job. He wasn't in the movie very long, but did a very nice job, and I believed him and Axel, were great friends, and you really hate it when he gets murdered. And, Axel goes out to Beverly Hills, and from the very beginning, he goes and meets up with an old friend who also knew the friend that was murdered, and her boss had employed his friend, so he goes and visits him, and he kind of sneaks in. He's very good at deception and getting what he needs. He's very tricky. He's very it's fun to watch, the shenanigans that Axel Foley gets into. That's why we love him in this movie. But it's still dropped to the floor laughing hysterically hilarious. It still is. The one-liners, the infamous scenes, Axel Foley putting the banana in the tailpipe of John Astin and Judge Reinhold's characters, that's classic. You know, I even remember when he bought the bananas from a young Damon Wayans, and Damon Wayans kind of playing this effeminate guy, and he goes like, shh, go ahead and take those bananas, don't worry about it. That's a memorable scene. It's hilarious. It's funny. It has nothing to do with the movie, but it's so funny. And, you know, but Axel, I can't help it. I love Eddie Murphy. You know, Axel Foley, you know, has to solve this thing. Okay, so I don't want to ruin the whole story. The show is not about going over the whole movie. It's what I thought about it. And Beverly Hills Cop is one of my all-time favorite movies. I would put it at least in my top 30. Which may not seem like a big accomplishment, but there are hundreds of movies that I really love. But Beverly Hills Cop, I grew up with this movie. I mean, it came out before I was born, but in the 90s when I finally saw it, or when I was old enough to see it, I loved it. It made me laugh, and still makes me laugh to this day. It's an entertaining movie. It's what a movie is supposed to be. You know, when you go to the theater, this is the kind of movie that I expect to see. You know, a comedy movie with an edge. And it's rated R, so it's rough, and there's language, you know, and even titties. You know, there's some titties. You know, they go to a titty bar. And another famous scene in the strip club, where Axel Foley sees the two guys coming in and looks like they're going to rob the place, and he basically stops them. And it's just one great scene after another. It gels together so well. And what's funny is the script for this went through so many rewrites and changes, and Sylvester Stallone was actually supposed to play it, but he wanted to rewrite it. They didn't want to go that way, so they bought him out of the contract and he left. And I guess what he rewrote for Beverly Hills Cop, he used for... Oh, shit. I don't remember the name of the movie. I've actually not seen it. Cobra, I believe. If that's not the right name, I apologize, but I believe it's... Yeah, I believe so. So another Sylvester Stallone action 80s movie, you know. But they finally went with Eddie Murphy, who was not the studio's first choice, but thank Christ they went that way, because he fit it perfectly. Because he wasn't a big muscular specimen. He looked like he could be a cop from Detroit. And the way he talked, the way he moved, he had that confidence. And that was brought by Eddie Murphy. He had that comedic confidence back then, you know, when he was really on top of his game on SNL, and then did like Trading Places, and then 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop. He was on fucking fire in the 80s and was just doing so well. But the script was still shit when he got the movie, from what I've heard. But most of the great shit in the movie was improv by him. And he was able to bring the other actors back into the scene with their dialogue. And the movie flows so well. The improv fits in perfectly with the story of the movie. And it's obvious when Eddie has to read the actual script. You know, it's serious time to get the story back on track. It's a great flow in the movie where it's so funny, and then we get back to the story. But then it's funny again, back to the story. It works so well. It's one of the best comedies for that reason, because a lot of the best comedies have some drama in it. And Beverly Hills Cop does have a lot of drama. I mean, his friend was murdered. You know, the bad guy's a very not likable guy. You know, his minions aren't very likable guys. Some of the police at first aren't likable, but then you really like them. And they know that Axel Foley's telling the truth, and, you know, they need to help him. And Axel's so passionate, he's going to do this no matter what, even if it costs him his job in New York. The police... I think it was just his police captain was played by an actual police captain, and he's hilarious. You know, he's one of my favorite characters throughout the entire series. But, you know, it's so funny. This movie was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, an Academy Award, and it didn't deserve it because the best shit was improv by Eddie Murphy. And I don't mind the nomination. It's so funny to me. It's like, well, then why didn't 40-Year-Old Virgin get a nomination? Because the majority of that movie was improv, but the script was a lot more solid than Beverly Hills Cop. It was one of the worst scripts out there at the time. And thanks to Eddie Murphy's genius, it turned into a blockbuster and one of the best films of the 80s. And it still kills me that 40-Year-Old Virgin didn't get a nomination, but Beverly Hills Cop did. That's bothered me for years, just wanted to throw it out there. Back up to the movie, Beverly Hills Cop, if you haven't seen it, it is a thrill to watch. From the very beginning to the very end, you are with this character, Axel Foley. It is just fun. It is just a fun fucking movie. If you love a cop movie, this is probably the best comedic cop movie out there. I mean that with all my heart. It really is. I can't think of one that's better. It's so well put together. You know, the improv with the original script, they gel together. It's really a miracle that this movie was as good as it was. If there is a God or angels or whatever, they were all just looking down at this movie and blessing it as much as they could, because that's what this movie is. It's a blessing to cinema. And, you know, the performances, the acting is really well done. You know, all the actors fit their parts perfectly. They're so funny. They respond well to Eddie Murphy's improvs and makes it even funnier. And they also help the story as well. You know, the bad guy's great. The cops are all great. And, I mean, the direction is fine. The movie's also very gritty looking, which I like. Very 80s. And I think it adds to it. It gives it a certain style that they did match in 2, but not in 3, in case I forget to add that. 2 looked just like the first movie. The third one, we'll get to that. But, you know, from such a piece of shit script to come to gold is amazing, and that rarely happens. I talked about. There's not really much more I can say. Almost everyone has seen this damn movie. I mean, Beverly Hills Cop. It really is a masterpiece when it shouldn't have been. So, Beverly Hills Cop, one of my all-time favorite movies, one of my all-time favorite comedies. I have to give it a 5 out of 5. And you guys are probably tired of me doing that, and I promise, very shortly, there aren't going to be any 5 out of 5s. But for what it did, it honestly, it redefined cop movies. It redefined comedy movies. It did a lot for comedic films and cop films. It discovered something new. It made something new. And the 80s did that with a lot of movies, and Beverly Hills Cop should get that appreciation. I mean, who doesn't love Beverly Hills Cop? When you see it, even if you're not an Eddie Murphy fan, you're going to love him as Axel Foley. That is just such an iconic character. How could you not love him? He's just so damn likable and so damn funny, and we want to see him succeed. We want to see him solve his friend's murder. So like I said, Beverly Hills Cop, a definite 5 out of 5. If you haven't seen it, please see it. It's on Netflix right now. Fucking see it. But we're going to move on to the sequel to Beverly Hills Cop, which really wasn't needed, but we got anyway. Beverly Hills Cop 2. So yes, Beverly Hills Cop 2, the sequel that was not necessary, frankly, really didn't need to be made. But for what we got, it's okay. Watching it again, I didn't like it nearly as much as I once did. You know, when I was younger, I loved the second one just as much as the first one. And no, I was dead wrong on that one. It's not a bad movie. It reminds me a lot of Ghostbusters 2, and I cut that one a lot of slack. I believe I gave it 3.5 out of 5. And I still think that was the right rating, because even though it was a complete rehash of the first one, it still was an entertaining movie. And Beverly Hills Cop 2 is an entertaining movie. And really the story in this one is stronger in some regards. Like, there's more time given to the bad guys. But the story is basically this. The police captain, not Axel Foley's in Detroit, but the one in Beverly Hills, Bogomil. John Astin, Judge Reinhold's characters, they've all become friends with Axel Foley over what happened in the first Beverly Hills Cop movie. Bogomil is on this alphabet bandit case, or alphabet killer. Does it say on here? No, it doesn't. But, yeah, whatever. But he's on this case, and he basically gets almost assassinated. And he survives it, but Axel Foley goes back to Beverly Hills to help John Astin, Judge Reinhold, solve these alphabet crimes to figure out who tried to kill their friend. Now, the good thing about this movie, there's a lot more Axel Foley with John Astin and Judge Reinhold. Billy and Tag Taggart, I believe. And there's a lot more of them together in this movie, and that's the main strength of Beverly Hills Cop 2. That's the main strength. Or these three get more time together. They're friends now. They're not on opposite sides, and that's the best part of the movie. When these three are on screen together, it's just a lot of fun. You can tell they're having fun. And, you know, all the same characters from the first one come back that we love, you know, minus the bad guys. We didn't love them. So, and they're all great. The police chief in Detroit, I still love him. He's my favorite character, besides Axel. You know, the story itself, you know, Eddie Murphy actually helped supply the story. And it's not a bad story for a cop movie. The whole alphabet crimes thing was a good idea, and I do enjoy that. The way it all kind of comes together, where Axel and them solve it, it's very much exposition heavy. It's one of those scenes where, like, in one scene, they explain everything for the audience. And it's very poorly written, and that's one thing I'll say. This script was poorly written, and the improv by Eddie, even though it's not bad, there's a lot of stuff in this movie, a lot of lines that I really love, it's not as classic as the first one. And it does just feel like a retread in a way, almost like they were forcing it. Like, well, you've got to improv something here. Go ahead, you're brilliant, you'll think of something. And it just doesn't work the same. It's very forced in my opinion. That's how I felt. But regardless, it's still entertaining. We get to see Axel Foley again. We get to see the other side characters that we love. And that's great. I mean, that's why we're watching this. We want to see them getting more shenanigans and see these characters grow. And they do give, you know, more story to Taggart and Billy, you know, especially Billy. The stuff with Judge Reinhold in this is very, very funny. Taggart, not so much. He's not given that much, but I love his character. He does a great job. You know, it's my big issue with this movie, it's not very well edited together. There are a lot of mistakes that add up. I can't think of any continuity problems story-wise. It's just a lot of editing, shots used over again. It was very obvious that the script for this was in bad shape, and there was a shit ton of improvisation, and it just didn't always fit the movie. But regardless, who directed this? It's Tony Scott, who was not a bad director. I know he's passed away. I don't want to badmouth the dead. You know, he was a decent director. But in this one, it felt rushed. Like they made this movie really, really fast. And you're not going to get a good sequel like that. You really have to take your time, because Beverly Hills Cop was a game changer, the first one. And they didn't put the time and effort into this. They're just like, well, it'll make a lot of money. And it did. It made a lot of money. I don't think as much as the first one, because it wasn't nearly as good. Like I said, this is a lot like Ghostbusters 2, except not as much of a rehash. It does feel like an appropriate continuation of the story in some regards, but in others, it just feels really forced. And, I mean, like, the acting is good, the direction is not that good. It looks just like the first movie, I give them that. The editing, I think, is very piss poor. Too many mistakes and just too much shit that just doesn't look very good. You can tell, even if you're not a big movie fanatic, you can tell you're like, ugh, that wasn't very good. It's distracting, you know, but for what it is entertaining. There's a lot of good stuff in this, and it's just fun to see all these guys again. So Beverly Hills Cop 2, I give 3 out of 5. I give it that. It's an average movie. It's an average sequel. If you really love the first one, you'll like this enough, but do not expect the first Beverly Hills Cop. You can skip this one. If you just want to keep the first one, you can skip the second one. You don't have to see it. It's not an appropriate or necessary continuation. So, now let's move on to Beverly Hills Cop 3. So, I don't have a DVD or Blu-ray of this movie because I try not to put any shit in my fucking collection. This is one of the movies that I hate. I despise. It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, and I'm going by memory right now. They didn't even put this movie on fucking Netflix. They have the first 2. That's how bad this movie is. It really is that bad, and it's a shame. First of all, the movie looks low budget. It looks cheap as hell. I should probably say the story right now. Okay. Ugh. Axel Foley is in Detroit still, being a cop. his captain gets murdered. The one... And I hate that, because he was my other favorite character besides Axel Foley, and he gets fucking axed off. But fine. There has to be some kind of... something to happen for the story to continue. Well, again... These people are like from Beverly Hills, so Axel goes out to Beverly Hills. He meets up with Billy, but Bogermill's no longer in the movie. He's just gone, retired. Taggart, he's fucking gone, no longer in the movie. They replace him with... the bald guy from Pretty Woman, who I love him as an actor, but I didn't want him in Beverly Hills Cop. I want Taggart back. I want Bogermill. I want the crew back. But no, all we have is Judge Reinhold. And... okay, fine. But eventually he uncovers the bad guys and this plan at this amusement park, and... Folks, seriously. I hate this movie. I hated this movie. Even when I saw it when I was younger, I knew it was bad. And I watched Good Booger... Good Booger... I guess now I could call it Good Booger. Good Burger every fucking day. I watched bad movies all the time. And don't get me wrong, I still love Good Burger because it's nostalgic for me, but it's a piece of shit movie. But at least it seems like some effort was put into it. Beverly Hills Cop is as forgettable as a movie or a sequel can be. The script, again, was complete shit. And the director said, well, the first two scripts were shit, and Eddie helped save the movies. But apparently Eddie Murphy forgot to bring his funny bone onto set. He just didn't want to be funny anymore. So he didn't do any improv. He didn't do anything. Axel Foley wasn't Axel Foley at all. It was just a straight cop movie with no substance. It was lame. And like I said, and the direction wasn't good. The script was awful. The acting really isn't that good, and I'm including Eddie Murphy in that. They bring back the... Bronson Pinchot from Perfect Strangers, that character from the first Beverly Hills Cop, and that scene is classic. They bring him back for the third movie, and he's annoying. You fucking ruin it. You ruin that character from the first movie. He was so memorable, and this one, it's so stupid. And there's so many cliches and just dumb fuckery that is a complete waste of the moviegoer's time. And again, I'm going by memory. I wasn't gonna review this, but I remember enough about this. I've seen it enough times. I remember how awful it is. I don't need to rewatch it. I don't want to rewatch it because I love the first Beverly Hills Cop movie so much. And the second one, at least it was a decent sequel. I could watch it and be entertained. But the third one, it looked like a made-for-TV movie where they just gave up. I mean, it's like they knew not even halfway through this movie's going to be complete hell, but we gotta finish it, so, action. It's awful. It is truly just awful. And I'm just going to keep saying shit like that, so I'll stop it there, because don't see it. Don't see it. There's nothing of value in this movie, from the opening scene to the ending. It is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. There are much worse out there, but for me, being such a big Beverly Hills Cop fan, this was multiple slaps to the face and the dick. It was horrendous. One of the biggest failures ever in Hollywood. Beverly Hills Cop 3, 1 out of 5. And you may be thinking that I'm being harsh. Go watch it. Hell, watch the first one, then watch the third one, and tell me I'm wrong. If you can tell me that I'm wrong, doesn't matter because I'm not. I'm right. Fuck that movie. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on the Beverly Hills Cop trilogy. The first movie, one of my all-time favorites. The second one, it's an okay sequel. The third one, there you go. Never going to be a part of my collection. I hate it that damn much. But we still have the first one, and if you've never seen it, please, please go see it. And if you're curious about part 2, or 2, whatever, go see that too. It's not bad. They're both on Netflix as I'm sitting here in this chair. Probably still will be when this video goes up. The third one, though, anyway, thank you very much for tuning in to another rendition of Too Many Movies. I'm Filmholmes. As you can see, I got more movies I gotta watch. If you have any suggestions of movies you want me to watch and review, please comment below, and I will try to watch the movie whenever I can. So until next time, kiddies, I'm Filmholmes. I'll see you in the next video. Later.